Hello, everybody. I'm Gail Z and Morgan Brice, and today we're going to take a look at Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh of the Night Vigil series with Sons of Darkness, and places we visited in my Morgan Brice Witchbane book, Dark Rivers, as well as some vintage pieces from the Jake Desmond series, Iron and Blood and Storm and Fury. And we may have even hit a few places in the Joe Mack Adventures. So come along with me and let's see one of my favorite cities. We lived there for 10 years. I like to pick cities that I'm familiar with, either from visiting frequently, maybe with family there, or we've gone there on vacation, and Pittsburgh is definitely one where I've done all those things. So if you're not familiar with Pittsburgh, it is on the western side of Pennsylvania. Now, while we have the map up, let me just give you a little bit of geography here. And the Spell, Salt, and Steel series is located up around here. Linesville and Conneaut Lake, this whole area, as well as more towards central Pennsylvania. Just to give you an idea, the cryptid preserve in Spell, Salt, and Steel is right in this area. Pittsburgh is right down I-79 from that area, about 2 hours south. And so this is the city, 3 rivers, actually 4 rivers, because there's an underground aquifer. It's called the city with an entrance because you come through a tunnel on the main way in, and and the view of the city absolutely explodes. But it's a wonderful city with plenty of great architecture and a lot of history and a lot of cool, creepy stuff too, which is why I picked it. So let's start with the Strip District. Now, the Strip District is not what you think it is. It is a strip of land along the Allegheny River, and it is traditionally where the grocers and produce vendors and wholesale food people had their locations. Still is very much that. And if you want some great baklava by the sheet, if you want fresh fish, all kinds of good stuff, you'll find it in the Strip District. Why is the Strip District important? Well, there's some battles set there in Storm and Fury, and it's also where the headquarters for Brandon Desmond is. And it's also got the St. Stanislaus Church, which shows up in the books. But as you can see, it's a lively place. If you've ever heard about the Primanti Brothers sandwich, which has the French fries on the inside of the bun, you would find the original Primanti Brothers here in the Strip District. And it catered to truckers. So when the truckers would come by at 3 in the morning, they wanted a sandwich, but they wanted the fries, and they needed it all in something they could eat one-handed while they drove. And so Primanti Brothers famous sandwich was born. Now, Heinz, the pickle people and the ketchup people, originally based in Pittsburgh, and they have taken over a historic building and created the Heinz History Center. It's an absolutely fantastic museum about Pittsburgh's history. It also happens to be in the building that I mentally use for the Brandon Desmond headquarters. So here you can see some of its Christmas displays. Of course, you've got a lot of beautiful public art in Pittsburgh. And a little more from the Heinz History display, but it really takes you through made history in Pittsburgh and goes all the way back to its Revolutionary War and before that era. So you're getting a real quick look here at Pittsburgh history. But if you ever get a chance to visit in the Strip District, the Heinz Museum is worth the trip. Now, Shadyside is where Jack Desmond's family has their home. It's a beautiful neighborhood, not far from the University of Pittsburgh. You can see, I don't pick the pictures. This church, Shadyside Presbyterian, is used in Iron and Blood as the location where Jack Desmond's father's funeral takes place. And as I said, very vibrant place, lots going on. Pittsburgh is a fun city, very walkable, lots of great old architecture. This person seemed to be a bit obsessed with playgrounds. But that gives you, pardon me, an idea. So Shadyside is this area here, and you've seen Shadyside Presbyterian Church. It is a, so you've got a nice suburban upscale neighborhood, a lot of Victorian houses, just up from Carnegie Mellon University and from Squirrel Hill, which we also see in the books. Now, Homewood Cemetery is the site of a big battle in Iron and Blood. We did get a tour of the cemetery, and we warned her that we were authors, but we did block out the fight scene in the cemetery with two of our very aghast teenage children and a tour guide who didn't really seem to quite understand what was going on. It's got some important and interesting monuments. This pyramid monument factors in Iron and Blood. It happens to be the one where the big Tesla coil comes out and zaps the bad guys. But you can see it's got some beautiful statuary, beautiful mausoleums. The Hines family has a plot there in what's called Millionaire Row because the plots are so large, they're really more of a yard. And according to the tour guide, the Hines family mausoleum sleeps 21. It actually has a second floor. And here you can see some of the folks who put in Lewis Comfort Tiffany stained glass windows in their mausoleums because dead people need a good view. But you can see some of the cemetery there and some beautiful markers. One of the things that I really love about Pittsburgh is how you have a combination of the old and the new. And so Pittsburgh's a very vibrant city. There's a lot of new stuff going on, but history go. Now, the University of Pittsburgh area, here you can see we are just a little bit further down from Squirrel Hill and Shadyside. Up from downtown Pittsburgh. And Carnegie Mellon, Carlow University, University of Pittsburgh are all here in this same area, as well as some other things. This is an area where we see Jake Desmond and Rick Brand and a number of Mitch and Jacob in the Storm and Fury stories coming through this area because it is a major area to come from Shadyside into the main city. You see the chapel there at University of Pittsburgh, Soldiers and Sailors Hall, view of downtown Pittsburgh. Now the nationality rooms in the bottom of that tower you saw at the beginning are different rooms in what's called the Cathedral of Learning, which is a 37-story building on the campus of University of Pittsburgh. And they are classrooms that have all been decorated in homage to the folk art styles of various European countries. By the way, that building is to be extremely haunted. I've been there a number of times, never saw a ghost, did decide to walk all the way downstairs from the 37th floor on the steps because it seemed like a good idea at the time. I was in high school and it was painful later, but you can see some more of the art. Really beautiful rooms. And they are a nod to all the different countries whose immigrants have helped make Pittsburgh what it is, because of course Pittsburgh was the steel capital of the world at one time, and it drew people from all over the world. So Squirrel Hill is a neighborhood just up from Shadyside, just down from Shadyside and near the area around University of Pittsburgh. It is it's a gorgeous area with, as you can see, a lot of older buildings, very close to where we used to live, major hospitals. Kind of get an idea from looking at some of these pictures that Pittsburgh has a lot of old and new meshed together. And so while it's a city that is continuing to grow and reinvent itself, I love stores like that. You know you're going to find something cursed or haunted. while it continues to reinvent itself, it still has hung on to a lot of its history and some beautiful architecture. You can see the slant on some of those streets, and let me tell you, they are not a whole lot of fun in the winter. Pittsburgh does get its fair share of snow. So Squirrel Hill definitely shows up in Iron and Blood. Polish Hill also shows up in Iron and Blood. Now we're coming over here toward the Allegheny River, and you've got German Hill, Polish Hill, a number of other areas named for the immigrants who originally settled there. Of course, that has dispersed largely in the 100 years since then, although many families have remained in. And this is where we run into the Laganje in Iron and Blood, the Orthodox Polish priests who are a little unorthodox when it comes to fighting demons. So all we have there is a map. Let's look at the Hill District. This is the area kind of between University of Pittsburgh and downtown Pittsburgh. And of course, Pittsburgh is a city that comes to a point. As you've got the Monongahela River, the Allegheny River, they join to form the Ohio River here at the point. And you can see where 376 comes in from a tunnel from the other side. And when you burst through that tunnel entrance, you get this glorious view of the city, which is particularly nice at night when everything is lit up. I want to pause here just for a second so that you get the lay of the land. Over here is the original Heinz factory location. This area here is where our private investigator in Iron and Blood has his apartment and does some of his investigating. Down here, you can see the Point State Park. Of course, that wouldn't have been there at the time of Iron and Blood because this really wasn't a major area. It was actually surprisingly industrial. Hill District up here is where it's in between the University of Pittsburgh and downtown. We have a lot of carriage chases and people going back and forth in Iron and Blood through here. And I think this is also just going to give us a map. But there you go. Now, Point State Park, which glimpsed a little bit. This is a little more modern than shows up in any of the books, but it's worth looking at. This is indeed a fort, and it is what remains of Fort Pitt, which was from 1764. So this area has a lot of history from the American Revolution. Before that, from the unfortunately named French and Indian War. And we've got a mountain here at the point, which becomes a all lit up with strings of light for Christmas, like a Christmas tree. You can see the major bridges that go by here. And so we're going to take a look. There's another view from the point back toward the city. I love the black glass castle-like building, this PPG glass building, Pittsburgh Plate Glass. You know, it shows up in movies like Inspector Gadget, and it is, we always think of it as the Darth Vader Palace, but you can see all the bridges going from both sides on Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh, and the centrality of the rivers and how much they shape the city's, the ways in and out of the city. Now, again, these bridges are newer. There have been bridges over the river for hundreds of years. Many of those old original bridges have needed to be replaced since the time of Iron and Blood, but it's definitely a city that moves on its rivers. Here we see the entrance to the Fort Pitt area, down along the river. And yes, if you live here long enough, you learn to spell things like Monongahela and Yakagani. It just goes with the territory. So, and you can see there's a lot of recreational boating on the rivers. There are locks and dams to get you from one end of, from upriver to downriver. You can see the stadiums in the past. Of course, in the old days, Three River Stadium That's gone now. We have Heinz Stadium, we have PPG Stadium, so we have brand new stadiums. And there's another look at that Darth Vader castle. Now, Mount Washington factors in the Storm and Fury story. How a wolf who is, or actually a shifter, who is trying to broker peace between the warring immigrant factions of the Polish and the Irish immigrants here in South Side, or if you are a true Pittsburgh local, South Side. Of course, you know, the group plural is not y'all in Pittsburgh, it is yuns or yins, depending on what neighborhood you're from, which is shortened of you ones instead of you all. So yuns or yins actually shows up in Iron and Blood. This wooded area is actually a very steep hill. And down here on the riverbanks used to be massive steel factories. Now, many of those are gone now, but the neighborhoods and hundreds, in fact, thousands of stairs going up and down these steep hills so that the people who lived on the top of the hill could come down the hill and work in the steel factory. It used to be on both sides of the river, massive, massive buildings. Back then, the air was so polluted that a journalist referred to Pittsburgh as hell with the lid off, because all you could see was smoke and the flames from the burn-off towers at the steel mills. Well, they cleaned up. It's now very, very clean. And guess what? All of this land up here on top of the hill is now very expensive land because it has a gorgeous view of the city that you can see now. But this is also where you have the Duquesne and Monongahela inclines, which are funiculars, small railroads to take a car up a hill. That factors in the story Ghost Wolf. There's a beautiful view of the Heinz Stadium and a view from the overlook of the city itself. There's Pittsburgh at night, and it is a gorgeous sight. Some of the older churches in Pittsburgh on the south side, many of them have funded their building projects and their budget. Pierogi sales, and again, this is another one you can tell people are from a Polish or Hungarian background, whether it's pierogi or pierogi. Whatever they are folded dough with filling inside, made usually by very devout little old ladies and sold on Saturday mornings at drive-through pickups at the churches to help fund whatever good cause is needed at the moment. Pittsburgh does get snow. And let me just go back there. What you've got here is a place called Station Square. It used to be a big railroad, passenger railroad terminal. It's now a hotel. And it has been a number of things, but it was probably best remembered as being a boutique shopping mall with some terrific dining and entertainment options. And then, of course, there's also a riverboat that offers cruises and goes up and down the rivers. One thing with Pittsburgh is the rivers are working rivers. You'll see barges as well as pleasure craft because they are still major arteries. And here you go with another overlook. Looking back toward the point in the fountain. You can always orient yourself when you see the point in the fountain. You can see just how far up we are when we're on Mount Washington. There's that Darth Vader building again. Now, say in Pittsburgh, beautiful green space, and it's also the scene of some battles and some chases in Iron and Blood. There were a lot of battles and chases and explosions in Iron and Blood. Here we have a really nice view. That tall tower is that Cathedral of Learning with the nationality rooms in the building. And as you can see, we've got nice green space. The Phipps Conservatory is a beautiful place to spend an afternoon. And if you are in the Oakland area, there is also the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. which has two major fights in Iron and Blood, and Jake falls down the stairs. I have been there on than I can count, and it's got dinosaur bones. It is a really cool museum. You can see Pittsburgh does the holidays upright. There we go, dinosaurs. And at this point we are in Oakland, right between University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon. So they're referenced, I believe. Carnegie Mellon is at least in the books, but there are a lot of carriage chases through this area. The museum existed, and I believe so did the greenhouse, the conservatory. There you have the outside of the Carnegie Museum. Now, what's interesting is when I visited as a child, the walls were black. They were completely soot covered and totally black. And then as part of the city's cleanup, they cleaned them, and look, they're not black anymore. That was kind of shocking when you finally saw them without the soot. The Duquesne Incline, as I mentioned, is referenced in Ghost Wolf. It is one of those funiculars that comes from the bottom of the riverbank here, and you can see some of the barges there, and goes up very steeply as a means of transport. Now, the time that Iron and Blood took place, there were all kinds of, and some still survive, staircases up and down these hills so that everybody didn't try to come down in the incline. And there was a switchback set of stairs right about here that really did lead up to the top of Mount Washington, and that's the switchback trail that the main character in Ghost Wolf takes. Here's another beautiful view of the city and the point. I love Pittsburgh. It's always one of my favorite places. Here you get a better look at that car and the terminal station at the top. You can see just how steep that is. If you're in Pittsburgh, you better have good tires, good face hole, good hill hold on your car, know how to drive on slippery brick and cobblestone in the snow and ice, and be good at driving in inclement weather. Love the city. Not always the best weather, particularly in February, but you can see how the inclines have been lovingly maintained. There is the Duquesne Incline, and then a little further up the river, there is the Monongahela Incline. But the Duquesne Incline, and that's a little dizzying, isn't it? That's the view from inside the car on the way down. The Duquesne Incline is the one that was used in the book. Grand View Overlook. We've seen a little bit of this, but now you can see where we are looking out on the river. Marymount Church, I believe, is mentioned. We've got stadium and some more commercial buildings down here. And Pittsburgh has its beautiful, beautiful churches of all varieties. Gorgeous statuary, beautiful architecture, and tribute to all of the people from so many places in the world and so many faiths who came to create what happened in Pittsburgh, and that was the steel industry. There you have Pittsburgh at night, all seasons, and you get an idea of some of the types of houses as well as the high rises. Gorgeous place to get pictures for the New Year's and 4th of July fireworks. There you have it in the fog. And we are back at the museum. So let's look at Homestead. Now, if you remember Joe Mack in the Joe Mack Adventures, Joe Mack is a steel worker who came from Hungary and wanted a better life for his family. His wife and child died of fever shortly after he arrived, and he's working at the Homestead Works. Well, Homestead was the site of a bloody labor massacre in the late 1800s when striking workers were massacred by the Pinkertons. And it remains one of the country's bloodiest labor strikes. In the book, Joe is standing in solidarity with his co-workers, although he really doesn't think this is going to go well, and he dies on the riverbank. Of course, this area here along the riverbank that looks bare is where the one of the steel mills, the huge Homestead Works, used to be. And you've never seen what a steel mill looks like. Now, there are rolling mills and there are pressing mills and there are all kinds of different mills, but they are massive. They are so large that you almost kind of look twice at them to say, wow, you know, did people actually build these things? Because they're so big. Of course, now we're seeing them in their decline and abandonment. Of course, we also have some gorgeous architecture. I just love the buildings in Pittsburgh and the bridges. But you can see just how huge the steel mills were and how imposing. And of course, they would run 24/7. Those are some, those bowl-shaped things are pieces from inside the steel mill, and I don't know what they did. I'm trying to tell you. Mills would run 24/7, and they would have, they would be burning off gases from these tall, thin towers, chimneys, and you could see those flares of flame from miles away. A few of the mills still exist, most of them are gone. Now, here you have, again, down on this area where the mills once were, the stacks, which are a historical landmark, giving an idea of just how tall those huge chimneys used to be. Pittsburgh in every way is very much a tribute to working people, tradespeople. Let's take a look at the Carry Blast furnace. Again, these mills like the ones that we saw in Iron and Blood and Storm and Fury, as well as Joe Mack stories. They were hot, they were loud, they were dangerous. There was no OSHA, there were no protections. People sometimes did fall into the molten steel. So you really took your life in your hands working there. As time went on, you could make a decent living if you were willing to put up with the dangers, but it was a hard life. Now we've got Shadyside Presbyterian Church. We glimpsed that before. This is, of course, where Jake Desmond's father's funeral was held. So it is a Richardson, I will tell you later, it is a very particular style of architecture, Richardson Romanesque. You'll find that in other places, but that architect was particularly prolific in the Pittsburgh area. I don't pick the pictures here. You can see that square turret, beautiful brickwork, stonework, really gorgeous building. Now, let's jump over here to one of the churches in Homestead. This is the church whose cemetery Joe Mack buried his family. So it's a Hungarian Catholic church. And as you can see, beautiful statuary. Joe Mack is a folk hero in Pittsburgh. There's some debate on whether he was invented like Paul Bunyan or whether he really did arise from folk tales. There's also some debate over whether or not it was ironic, because apparently Mack means dumbass in Hungarian, but we're sticking with it. You can see some beautiful stained glass here inside and fish fries. You know, if you're not selling pierogies, you're selling fish fries, particularly during Lent. Churches in Pittsburgh move on their stomachs. Now, the north side of Pittsburgh plays a big role in Iron and Blood. Of course, this is where our private investigator has his rooming house. And this massive building is what remains of the original Heinz Corporation that was the pickle company. You see the Heinz 57? People who grew up in Pittsburgh will tell you that you knew when they were doing pickles because all of the air smelled like pickles. When you used to go through the factory on school tours, they would even give you little plastic pickle pins. Now, in Sons of Darkness, Travis Dominic has is the ex-priest and former Sinistrom agent. And we find out that he continues to have access to the secret Vatican Library, which is underneath the chapel and administration building at Duquesne University. Duquesne University is on a bluff overlooking the river. So what you really don't get a good idea of from this picture is just how far down that road is. But if I can get this to cooperate, I'll take you in closer for a good look at where that secret Sinistrom Library is. And here we are at Old Main Administration. Now, they'd probably be surprised to find out that there is a secret arcane library beneath this, but Travis Dominic knows that, and now you know that, and now you've seen the place. Duquesne is a predominantly Catholic university, and it is well regarded, been around for a long time, but you can see you've got some beautiful architecture. Now in Dark Rivers, Seth and Evan come to Pittsburgh looking for the next witch lord and trying to protect his next intended victim. And Dead Man's Hollow is indeed a real place. I try to use real places as much as I possibly can because I think it grounds a book in the place, and I want the place to be the city, the location to be as much character as the people. And I want the story to be so grounded in its location that it really couldn't happen the same way anywhere else. So here we are at Hello. Pittsburgh's big on abandoned tunnels and abandoned industrial locations, as well as some beautiful nature trails. Spooky tunnels, anybody? We have lots of them. And really gorgeous areas. You see down along the river and more reminders of the past. It's not that unusual to be walking through the woods and come upon the ruins of something that was a factory of some sort 100 years ago, and it's been just kind of left to go back to nature. Blue Mist Trail also shows up in Dark Rivers as the boys go looking for clues to help them find the witch lord and track down his anchor. And of course, if you look these up, you're going to see the lore about them and the urban legends and the supposed hauntings. You may not be very far from the city in some of these places, but it can feel very remote. Get out of the urban area very quickly, and then once you are, you're on your own. It's very wooded. Livermore is the town that was located on the Conemaugh River, going a little east here, between Blairsville and Salzburg. And it was flooded to make a dam. Parts of it poke up through the water when there's a drought, but it gets used also in Dark Rivers because I just think it's fascinating to think that underneath that man-made lake is a town that was not even really completely razed. There's still buildings there. Now, maybe not exactly like the stories say, where you can hear the bell in the church tower, the cemetery. That is pretty much all that remains of Livermore as a town. Of course, the cemetery is said to be haunted as all get out. And why wouldn't it be when your town has been flooded and forgotten? And here is the tunnel that plays such a big important role in Dark Rivers. We got rid of the bars for the purpose of the story. A little authorial license. Now, the Indian God Rock shows up in a Storm and Fury story. It is indeed a real thing. And you can see how beautiful the landscape is around Pittsburgh. But it is it's a big rock with petroglyphs, and nobody's entirely sure, and unfortunately graffiti, nobody's entirely sure who the original carvers were, what group left the pictograph. Now, they said it has unfortunately been left unguarded for a long time, and so got some damage to it, but you can still see some of the original carvings, and the mystery continues. I'm going to go back to Shady Side because here we have Jake Desmond's house, and I'm going to attempt to take you right there. There you see Shady Side Presbyterian Church in the background. We're really only a block from it. So when Jake's brother insists that they take the funeral cortege on a long meandering journey so as to be properly seen and appreciated, it really is ridiculous, because if you came out of their driveway, turned right, and then turned left in the next block, you'd be at the church. So if you know the location, that really is an in-joke. But here is Jake Desmond's house. And, you know, we're seeing it from the street. It is a beautiful gray Victorian house. It's very large, very pretty. Set in an area where you can see there are a lot of large historic homes. And just wanted to show you that because, of course, we have people firing out the windows at, let me get it back here. We have people firing out the windows with rifles, iron and blood, when they come under attack. I'm pretty sure the neighbors would take offense to that. And our final one is the Monongahela Incline. We've seen the Duquesne Incline. And now, just for good measure, you can see that there is still a very strong industrial presence on the south side. They have also, as the big factories have left, they have replaced them with shopping and entertainment areas. Depending on how the economy is, those can be doing very well or not. But there's still a lot of industrial presence along the rivers. Well, folks, that ends our tour for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it gives you some perspective on the city. And if you haven't read Iron and Blood, Storm and Fury, the Cauldron, which is the first Joe Mack Adventures, Dark Rivers, which is my Morgan Brice, which is the third book in my Morgan Brice Witchbane series, I hope this might pique your curiosity, get you to go take a look. Thank you very much. We'll be back with more tours later. I really appreciate you sharing with me today, and I'll see you online.